You joined a new company as a sales manager, or you finally hired a team, or you've been running one for, I don't know, a year or two, and you don't actually know what's happening on the floor. You have a CRM data and you have revenue numbers, but you don't know why the numbers look the way they do. And is it the bad rap? Is it the systematic training gap, or is it the script or the market? You don't know. And you're making decisions anyway. So here's what I do in the situation: I look at 10 clients, one specific thing, 30 minutes, that's it. And I can tell you with confidence whether you have a team problem, a process problem, or an individual problem. This method has been a formal name. It's been official audit standard since 1982. BMW uses it, Apple, IRS, hospitals, and most sales managers have never heard about it. So the first time I've used this method was in 2015 when I was running like a small, like a call center for the beauty products company, and they were inviting people via cold calls to these procedures, and there was no CRM, that nothing. Like pretty much it was just like assessing what you can by sitting by side of like a sales rep and understanding, like what could be done there better or worse, and because there was no data. Well, there was no other, like there was no different way on how to see what's wrong rather than just sitting and observing and seeing what's happening. So, and the biggest problem in the trap that the most business owners or sales team leaders fall into is they actually start fixing what's burning the most, right? The biggest problem, they're trying to help somebody who shouts out the most, right? Well, sometimes it actually helps, but in the most of the cases, are you sure that that's the right thing that you should be fixing right now? And by the way, if you're new here, I post real sales frameworks and diagnostic tools every Wednesday. Subscribe below. The method is called non-statistical audit sampling. It became a formal standard in 1982. The AICPA definition is this: audit sampling is applying procedures to less than 100% of items in a population so that you can draw reliable conclusions about the whole. Translation: you don't need to review everything to understand everything. In a sales management position, this means pick 10 clients, define one question, and the answer you get represents the entire team's behavioral. Not a perfect answer, obviously, no directional one, but good enough to act on. Here's the number one that matters. If 6 out of 10 show the same problem, you have a systematic issue. You're not dealing with one rep, you're dealing with a broken process. 3 or fewer, and most probably individual problem, address the person. And if it's 4 to 6, then it's ambiguous, like pull another 10. That's the whole diagnostics framework. So when I'm pulling out like those 10 clients, the biggest thing that I am trying to do is I'm trying to recognize the pattern and see the whole picture. So obviously by me looking at certain amount of leads while I'm trying to assess like a particular thing, it doesn't disconnect my brain from taking a look at the different avenues. And when I pull up those clients and I will look at some sort of the specifics, like unconsciously I'm looking at other variables as well, and I see what patterns is happening there to so I can start probing and going deeper on that specific findings. Here's what made me take this seriously. This is like another sales idea. It never was. BMW uses it on their assembly lines. They pull a small number of units every shift and they check one specific parameter. Not everything, one thing. They call it a layered process audit. It's mandatory under AITF 16949, which is the quality standard for every major car manufacturer on the planet. Ford implemented it company-wide, measurable deficit reduction with 1 year. The key variable wasn't the sample size, it was a frequency and a single parameter focus. The IRS uses a version of this called the discriminant function system. It checks a small number of unusual parameters in every tax return. If they cluster, full investigation. Hospitals use it. The Joint Commission requires audits of between 5 and 15 patients per review cycle, 5 to 15 out of thousands. Apple audits over 1,200 supplier facilities every year. Findings from that sample drive policy changes across the supply chain for many thousands of factories. Barney Madoff run a 65 billion fraud for 17 years. When investigators pulled a small sample of transactions and looked at that one thing, the consistency of returns, they knew immediately something was structurally wrong. 10 transactions, one question, 17 years of fraud exposed. These are not small, scrappy operations running out of the gut instinct. They are the most operationally rigorous organizations on earth, and they all run on the same logic you can apply to your sales team just in 30 minutes. So the last time I've used this sample testing was with one of the companies that I worked with, and I was looking for data for booked calls and how many days in advance they're actually booking a calls and if it's affecting a show-up ratio. So it turned out after reviewing the sample that 6 appointments that was booked more than 7 days in advance usually was rescheduled at least one time, which means, well, you can draw the conclusions yourself. Or the next thing, I was trying to assess how much time does it actually take from the end of an appointment to actually close the deal. An average for that particular company was 7 days, which means that the most hot time when you can actually influence the prospect decision is within that time gap. And if it goes beyond that, most probably the promise is that the deal is going to come in, and if your rep is keeping telling you to this thing, it's not going to happen. So there's 4 conditions for a valid 10 client test. 1, define the question before you look at the data. Don't open the CRM and see what just jumps on you. Decide what are you testing first. Did the rep ask a consequence question before presenting a solution? Did the rep log the next step after every next touch point? One question. Pick it before you actually look. Number 2, random selection. Don't pick your 10 best, 10 worst. Just take it in the middle. The signal lives in the average, not in extremes. Number 3, interpret the threshold. 6 out of 10 showing the same gap is systemic. Fix the process. 3 or fewer, individual problem. Coach the person. 4 to 6, ambiguous. Pull another 10 before you conclude anything. And number 4, know when to expand. If the sample is split, it's not an answer. This is a signal for you to go deeper. So what I usually do when I've took that sample test and I kind of see that there's some sort of the problem, what I do like to do is kind of assess the whole picture and situation rather than jumping on a particular like a problem and solving it immediately. So, and as soon as I see the whole picture of where the money is leaking and where the team is actually losing the money, I kind of break down that into like 2 variables, looking at which problems is easier to solve and is going to bring in most of the money. And then I just start with the easiest and with the one that's going to bring in the most of the money to company. Well, and talking about the sales teams and how do they perform and what actually impacts their results, I haven't seen the perfect sales team. Out of thousands of sales reps that I've seen, there's always some problems involved. Somebody is not doing the follow-up, somebody is not doing pre-calls, somebody is weak in actual call, and always when the human is going to be involved and you're going to put more pressure into people doing the stuff rather than replacing it with the system, there is going to be mistakes. And even with the system, there's going to be mistakes. Most sales managers feel like they don't have enough information to make the right decision. They actually have too much, but they don't have a filter. Just take 10 clients, one question, and spend your 30 minutes. That is your field filter. BMW doesn't review every single car. Apple doesn't review every factory. Hospitals don't review every single patient. They review enough with one clear parameter without the bias, and so can you. The method is 100 years old. The math is validated. You probably already been doing a version of it without actually knowing why it works. Well, now you know. And if you're still watching, I break down real sales diagnostics and management frameworks every week. Subscribe below. I post every Wednesday.